10 seconds. Hot mics. 3, 2, 1. You're in, Case.
It is Friday, which means it's time for some WNBA today, but it is the wrap on the WNBA Today season because we have a winner. We have a new winner as of Sunday. Now, if you guys joined us last Friday, we talked with Coach. We talked about the expectation for this big Game 5. We talked about what could potentially take place. We talked about what it's going to take for the Liberty to pull off the W, and that's exactly what took place. On Sunday, New York Liberty come out on top 67-62 to become the new victors and champions of the WNBA, a trophy that they have sought out hard for years and years on end. They've made it to numerous finals. They haven't been able to execute and close the books, but they were able to pull it off. Championship party has gone through New York City this week, but there is so much to get to when it comes to this matchup. Now, once again, if you joined us last week when Coach was talking about some of the best angles and props and how to view this game, one of the key things that he pointed out when it came to this matchup, when it came to New York pulling off a W, was if the Lynx would have a fast start. That's exactly what took place. They topped the Liberty in that first quarter 19-10, trying to get that momentum swing, trying to carry it over. But if you guys have been with us on this WNBA Today journey, you know the Lynx have been known to have that strong first quarter, a strong closeout in the fourth quarter, but it kind of gets into a toss-up situation when it comes to that second and third quarter. Second quarter, Liberty pull out in front, 17 points to the Lynx, 15 points. Then when it came to the fourth quarter, it was the Lynx on top, but the third quarter was all Liberty. They were able to hold off just enough in that fourth quarter, regardless of how many points the Lynx tried to stack up. So who helped with this victory when it came to pulling off the W for the Liberty? Breanna Stewart only had 13 points through 45 minutes of play. She was going to be a key factor in racking up. All the books had her hitting at least 18-plus points, and that happened not to be the case, but it wasn't necessary for them in order to pull off success. Behind her, Shaquall Jones. We've talked about her a lot with Coach James here on WNBA Today, and she only racked up 17 points through 42 minutes of play and 6 rebounds. But you know something that helped out tremendously? It's the 15 rebounds from Stewart. They were able to really get things going, to consistently try to get the ball over to the Liberty's hands so that they can hold off the Lynx just enough. You had no 20-point scorers when it came to the New York Liberty on Sunday to get this championship done. As for the other side, though, Minnesota had 2 20-point players pulling things off. Collier with 22 points, 7 rebounds through 44 minutes of play. And then you've got McBride, who we've talked about so much throughout the WNBA season, with 21 points, 5 rebounds, and that's through 43 minutes of play. So a number of key playmakers did show up on Sunday, but it looks like it was time for the Liberty to raise the trophy, and that's exactly what went down. Now, what are some other takeaways when it comes to the victory of this season for the New York Liberty? Most importantly, what was some of the successes when it came to Sunday's game? First and foremost, it was a big finish for the 2024 WNBA season. The 5th game of the year WNBA Finals between Minnesota and New York was the most viewed WNBA Finals game in 25 years. Now, talk about growing the sport. Talk about all the growth that came throughout this season, not only between ticket sales and getting butts in the seats, but also making sure that people were tuning in and supporting the growth of this sport. We saw that throughout the season, but most importantly, sometimes it's hard to retain that attention when it comes to the postseason, right? We've got baseball going on. We've got the football season getting into prime form, gearing towards the middle of their season. We've got college football getting ready to wrap up on November 30th, the World Series. There's so many factors playing in while the WNBA is taking place, and yet they were still able to pull in that viewership because of the talent and because of what this season has held thus far. Across all networks, especially according to ESPN, we had 3.3 million viewers to support the Minnesota Lynx taking on the New York Liberty, and the New York Liberty becoming champions after fighting year in and year out very, very hard. Now, we're going to talk about other takeaways that have taken place throughout this season, but maybe if I can get the bracket on the board here, we can kind of do a small rewind or a walkthrough as to what we saw throughout this postseason. We saw teams that we thought were dead in the water a few months ago come into the postseason trying to battle it out. If it wasn't for Caitlin Clark being the assist queen that she was all season long consistently, who knows if the Fever would have even seen the postseason. They had such a successful, consistent run once getting back from that Olympic break, but they weren't the only team. Another team that a number of people had a little sprinkle on when it came to the championship conversation was what was the Connecticut Sun going to do? They were pretty stout when it came to showing up defensively. They were good at creating turnovers, but they weren't the team that was able to do that night in and night out. And on top of it, you can be defensively sound and strong, but if you can't put some points on the board, you're going to fizzle out. And that's exactly what we saw, regardless of the numbers favorably that had the Connecticut Sun potentially sneaking in the mix of making it further than they did. Another team that was kind of interesting to watch throughout this WNBA season was the Dallas Wings. You have a team that knew how to slow down the game regardless of who their opponent was. We saw them go toe-to-toe with some of the top 3 teams in the WNBA this previous season, and they did that because they were able to slow down the game. They did that because they were able to force their opponent to play to their strengths, and that was something that played out pretty heavily here and there after that Olympic break. So probably one of the other takeaways when it comes to this WNBA season is the fact that some of those teams that were underestimated or that went through a lot of injury issues or that lost some key players along the way, they were able to kind of get this excitement back to their game after that Olympic break and create some good stretches there to really challenge the top teams in the WNBA. Now, as for some other takeaways in the season and top viewed games, we know that when the draft came about, we know that when Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese's names were participating and being a part of this season, that it was going to do a lot to impact this sport positively. Well, speaking of some of that impactfulness, I mentioned the high viewership of Game 5 of the WNBA Finals, and that's sitting at 3.3 million views. Well, let's talk about the other viewerships that just came in skyrocketing. The top 5 games outside of the finals would be Indiana Fever taking on the Chicago Sky, 2.3 million, and that was on June 23rd. June 16th, the Chicago Sky versus Indiana Fever, 2.25 million. Those 2 names that I mentioned beforehand clearly being extremely impactful for this WNBA season and the growth that we have seen contributed to it. So 2 top games, over 2 million views. Let's not give all the credit, though, to Caitlin and Angel. No, Seattle versus the Indiana Fever, 2.23 million views, and that was on August 8th on ABC. And then back in May, Fever versus Connecticut Sun, 2.12, and then June 30th, Indiana Fever versus the Phoenix Mercury, just sitting at 1.93. So not far off, but a number of games that nearly retained 1.8 million viewers and then some. And those are record-breaking numbers over the course of nearly a decade and then some. And a lot of it, yes, has to do with the players that have participated in this season, but also just the buy-in. Also, the excitement around it, the commercials, the ticket sales, the basketball sales, all the things in which people have bought into fan-wise and what the players have contributed have helped this sport grow. Now, of course, we're going to have Coach back to run us through some of his favorite moments in this WNBA season because we've got to see what other highlights have taken place. I've got 5 players that have sat on my MVP board since day one, and you know what? We're going to see where they stand. One of them has been mentioned during that Game 5 that I broke down at the top of this segment because how do you not get one Minnesota player into the mix? And I know you guys have heard me say it was Minnesota all the way. I really thought they were going to be able to pull off the win, but it was Liberty's for the taking. Also, let's just talk about one of the players that's probably going to be on my WNBA MVP board because I get to get one at the end of this. We've talked about McBride. We've talked about Collier. You guys know that I was always leaning towards Minnesota. That's where the sprinkle went. But when it comes to Ionescu, it may have not been the largest game for her in Game 5, but it didn't need to be because if it wasn't for her clutch three-pointer in Game 3, they would have never been looking at a Game 5 potentially. But as for the closeout, Ionescu only through 40 minutes of play had 7 rebounds, which is still tremendous, but 5 points on the board and 8 assists. Her ability to just kind of transform and readjust her game is what has had the Liberty be so successful this season. They have had 3 and 4 players that have been able to readjust their game. Stewart may have not gone off on the points, but she definitely came up strong when it came to the rebound column. So that adjustment, that fluidity, that's why the Liberty are your champions as of today for the 2024 WNBA season. But we got a lot to get to. Most importantly, we got to talk to Coach James Young, see what highlights he loved and enjoyed throughout this WNBA season and his final thoughts on that Game 5. So be sure not to go anywhere. Stick with us here on Sports Grid TV because WNBA Today is just getting started and we've got plenty to get through. Follow us over on social and we'll catch you on the other side of this quick break.
Look, Aaron Rodgers, it does seem like he really enjoys people like us, Vinny, talking about him.
I don't know what's going on here with Aaron Rodgers. I think there's some frustration settling in, and the Jets were not supposed to be this bad of a defense, right? They've had a lot of injuries. Maybe that's the thing here. Robert Saleh's influence is there. I know they have their defensive coordinator running things, but now he's distracted.
Newswire, only on Sports Grid.
When you talk about how these series came to a head and what has been happening in this postseason for the Yanks, offensively, it hasn't been Aaron Judge.
Baseball is such a big win here. All you ask for, East Coast Monster City, West Coast Monster City, the biggest of biggest Titan superstars on both sides here, two mammoth fan bases. The entire country can buy into this one.
The Early Line, only on Sports Grid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Sports Grid.
Welcome back into WNBA Today here on Sports Grid TV, the final episode of WNBA Today, just for now, because the season came to a close on Sunday as the New York Liberty were able to pull off the championship and hoist the trophy that they have been chasing for oh so long. So you already heard my opinion on Game 5. You already heard my woes of the Lynx falling short. You already heard the excitement and some of the takeaways for this season being the viewership and the growth of the game. But most importantly, now my friend James Young gets to join us to tell us his highlights of the season. Most importantly, what he saw in that Game 5, what it's like to be a New York supporter and fan to finally see New York Liberty pull off a championship. So let's get Coach's thoughts on all of that. Then maybe we'll see what his if he knows who his top 5 players of the season were and if we can take that toe-to-toe. But first and foremost, Coach, happy Friday. How's it going? Thank you for joining us for the last show of WNBA Today for now.
For now, yes. And Casey, I can't wait to talk about it because I thought this was a historic season in the WNBA. Everything from the play of the young rookies of obviously Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese to an original franchise in New York Liberty who had never won a WNBA championship, winning championship number 1.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you touched on the rookies because we were talking about the fact, at least one of my top takeaways when it comes to this WNBA season is the growth, but also the viewership. I mean, Game 5, we saw 3.3 million people tune in to support the Lynx versus the Liberty. Outside of that, there's been a number of games, 5 other games outside of that were record-breaking, but all of them, except for actually all of them, including the Indiana Fever, which just shows you what Caitlin Clark and the excitement of watching her play and being drafted brought into the mix of this game here. So you mentioned the rookies. How much did Caitlin Clark help grow the game this season? All right, it'll take us a minute to come back to Coach for just a second, but I think that that's something worth continuing to talk about. Outside of that, though, maybe we start touching on some of my top 5 players before we get a chance to grab Coach's top 5 players. Now, I tried to make it a little less obvious, but it is what it is. Of course, sitting on the top of the charts for me for my top 5 players has to be Minnesota Lynx player Napheesa Collier, someone who did it all. That's the biggest headline. That's the biggest thing that you can note next to Collier's name, someone who did it all. Averaging 20.4 points, sitting 5th in the WNBA. When it came to rebounds, she was sitting at 9.7 rebounds, sitting 3rd in the WNBA, and then 1.9 steals, making her sit at the second ranking in the WNBA. She was able to contribute offensively. She was able to readjust her game, kind of like we talked about in that first segment, and be so stout for her team defensively. Whatever they needed, she was able to come up strong with. Again, looking at her numbers when it came to Game 5, 7 rebounds through 22 points. But even if we wanted to go back just a little bit and see some of the other numbers that she's contributed to help her team pull through, 14 points but 9 rebounds. That's for Game 4. We know Game 4 was almost a potential narrow loss for the Lynx to barely even make it to a Game 5. Then looking at that Game 3, then you've got her for 22 points and 9 rebounds. So somebody, again, we in hockey have this guy, Nick Paul does it all. Well, Collier did it all for the Lynx regardless of what that result was. In the end, Coach comes back to join me. We were talking about giving Caitlin Clark some flowers for how she helped grow the game. I was also talking about a number of games that the Indiana Fever were a part of that had 2 million plus viewers outside of the 3.3 that watched Game 5 of the Lynx versus the Liberty. So talk to us about the growth this season, Coach.
Well, the growth has been tremendous. And if you think about the growth of the WNBA, it started last year in the 2023 season off the heels of the national championship game between Iowa and LSU. So I'm not surprised the growth. Now, the amount of growth is probably something that's tremendous. But to me, it was the fact of how well Caitlin Clark played, from the jump, getting 20 points and 3 assists in her first game. That team struggling early on. But I'll tell you what, Casey, and I don't know if you were asking me this, there was one game that I remember so well, and that is, I think it was an 83-78 game. It was a Saturday afternoon game versus the Liberty, where Caitlin Clark literally put the team on her back on national television and led them to a big win over the WNBA champion. So the play of Caitlin Clark has been absolutely sensational. And what's great about it, Casey, is not just the fact that she brought the viewership, she brought the game with her. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like when you watch like the old XFL and everybody wanted to see it because they wanted to see, was it going to be any good? Same thing you say about the product. Caitlin brought the goods, and I'll tell you this right now. She is, in my opinion, right now, a top 5 player in the world. I'll even say this, going into next season, she's the number 3 player I have in the WNBA. I have it obviously Asia Wilson going first. Close, Stewie 2, Caitlin Clark 3, Napheesa Collier 4.
Okay. I do not hate that. I was wondering when I was going to hear Collier's name, but you're right. And I actually love the fact that you mentioned that she brought the game. Now, something else that Caitlin Clark deserves some flowers for is the fact that she elevated the players around her. I mean, we saw, I believe, Kelsey Mitchell start to step up her game and be able to match pace with Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark's ability to see some of these passing lanes was pretty tremendous. I mean, I started looking at some highlights over the course of the season, just kind of seeing some of the poetic ways that Caitlin Clark started setting up her teammates, the behind-the-back passes, coming in close to the net, setting them up perfectly to kind of see lanes that weren't seen there beforehand, helping her team have these strong starts to put stronger teams on their heels very quickly and out the gate. So, as Coach mentioned, she was able to bring the game up. She was able to continuously bring up her game specifically, elevate the people around her, and make the viewers not only come, but retain the viewership to be excited about what the WNBA season had to offer. Now, when we do get a chance after the break to continue talking with Coach, there's another rookie that we have to talk about. It's going to be Angel Reese, somebody who was also so destructive defensively, but had an unfortunate season-ending injury, which, we don't know what those numbers could have looked like, but we could actually picture the trajectory that Reese was going to be on, the buy-in when it came to the Chicago Sky, the respect for the head coach. There was just so many things playing into the success of Angel Reese, if not for that injury, and I think she deserves a lot of conversation around her name as well. Wouldn't you agree with that, Coach?
Yeah, I do agree, and obviously we'll talk about it more after the break, but the play of Angel Reese is fantastic. We just got to talk about making those layups, Casey, the layups.
And we'll get to that on the other side of the break. Make sure you don't go anywhere. Continue to hang with us here on WNBA Today as we stroll through some of the top moments of the season. Give flowers where flowers are due. Close out the WNBA season as it properly is respectful. So don't go anywhere. Keep us here on the other side of this break.
Look, Aaron Rodgers, it does seem like he really enjoys, people like us, Vinny, talking about him.
I don't know what's going on here with Aaron Rodgers. I think there's some frustration settling in, and the Jets were not supposed to be this bad of a defense, right? They've had a lot of injuries. Maybe that's the thing here. Robert Saleh's influence is there. I know they have their defensive coordinator running things, but now he's distracted.
Newswire, only on Sports Grid.
When you talk about how these series came to a head and what has been happening in this postseason for the Yanks, offensively, it hasn't been Aaron Judge.
Baseball is such a big win here. All you ask for, East Coast Monster City, West Coast Monster City, the biggest of biggest Titan superstars on both sides here, two mammoth fan bases. The entire country can buy into this one.
The Early Line, only on Sports Grid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Sports Grid.
One more rally here on WNBA today on Sports Grid TV. Continuing to kick it with Coach James Young. We were talking about Angel Reese, her contribution to the game this season before that season-ending injury. And, Coach, before we had to cut to that break, you were mentioning that you needed to see a couple more layups. Is that what I was picking up on?
Yeah, Casey, listen, she had an absolutely phenomenal year. Obviously, she was well on her way. She had broken the rookie record. I think she would have obviously out-rebounded Asia Wilson if she would have played the entire season. So it was a great year for Angel Reese. To me, my one concern is the ability to finish around the basket. As a coach and someone who worked with bigs, you can't have someone like Angel Reese shoot the way she did, which was really not a high percentage, particularly from the fact that she was shooting the ball so close. She shot 39.1% from the floor. Casey, if you're shooting, I would say about 85% of your shots within 6 feet of the basket, you got to be at a 50% clip. So if you just put her at 50%, right? She shot 12.3 shots per game. That's 4 more points. You're looking at a possible 18.13 rebound per game season. That's not just great for a rookie. That's legendary. Now, the thing we have to figure out is now that Teresa Weatherspoon's been fired, who becomes that new coach of the Chicago Sky? I think that place is a dumpster fire. I don't have enough time to talk about all the people that have left there, including James Wade last year who went to Toronto, but they got to get their you-know-what together because they got a star in their hands in Angel Reese.
Yeah, and the last thing you want to do is not put a star in position to have the most successful or capable season possible. We see that frustration start to kind of deteriorate certain stars' games, which is just so unfair when there's so much to offer in their game. But you said a key word, Coach, stars. Who are maybe some of your top players, maybe top 3 or top 5 from this 2024 season before I run through mine?
Well, number 5 is really tough for me because it came down to Alyssa Thomas and Sabrina Ionescu. I went with Sabrina Ionescu. Their team won the championship, and they're playing. We talked about it before, the game 3. Not the dagger she hit, but how about the dagger earlier on with less than a minute to play? 2 daggers and shit. Number 5, Sabrina Ionescu. Number 4, Nafisa Collier. Number 2 in the MVP voting going into next year is number 4. Number 3, Caitlin Clark. Folks, the Olympic break, forget all the noise of whether she was on the team or not, was the best thing for that kid. She got rest. She got able to get her legs under her, and she was fantastic. So was the Indiana Fever. Let's see what happens with re-signing Kelsey Mitchell right? And what are they doing, Nelson Smith? And now there's rumors about Stephanie White possibly from Connecticut going there. That's a damn message. You're talking to coaches that's finalists when they already have a coach there. Figure that one out, unless you got fired tonight. Number 2, obviously I'm going to go with Brianna Stewart. And number 1, Asia Wilson. Now, listen, the Aces underachieved had nothing to do with Asia Wilson. It had to do with the three-point shooting and the fact of Chelsea Gray. Let's see also what happens. Sneaky one here. Kelsey Plum, free agent, unrestricted. Does she come back or does she go to the Valkyries? Why? She's from California. Nice way to start off that franchise with that superstar, Kelsey Plum.
Wow, that's a great thing to keep an eye on during this off-season, Coach. Now, don't be mad. I swear, if I could pick a top 6, Asia Wilson would be the queen of it all, right? There was a number of times she put this entire team on her back and just carried the workload and had phenomenal finishes. When you talk about a player from top to bottom checking all the boxes, Wilson was it. But she did not make my top 5, unfortunately. Of course, number 1 for me is Collier. Again, somebody who did it all from points to rebounds to steals. I mean, to come in second place when it comes to steals, her defensive effort matched her offensive effort and vice versa, and it came in strong for the Lynx numerous times this season. Some highlights were her playing versus New York, Seattle, as well as Connecticut, had a career-high 42 points in the playoffs a month ago. Stay hot, Collier. And then you and I have talked about her so much. Sabrina Ionescu, how do you not? I mean, she was sitting in 5th when it came to assists on the season, 4th when it came to three-pointers made. Obviously, that clutch three-pointer with a second left in the game. And then you mentioned the other one that was equally just as clutch if you really paid attention to said game. Crucial games versus LA, Seattle, and Chicago. Clayton Clark, I'm right there with you on that. Angel Reese is right there for me as well. But Tina Charles, I mean, for what that team went through this season and the ways that she had to help out there, 9.6 rebounds on average, sitting 4th, giving the Atlanta Dream hope on a number of streaks after the Olympic break. I had to have her a part of my list, but Asia Wilson is right there too. Any final thoughts of the season, Coach, before we close out the final episode?
Shout out to the OG Tina Charles. Funny story. Saw her play high school at Christ the King High School. She may have been the best high school player I've ever seen, besides someone no one knows about named Kristen Samoji. Shout out to Kristen Samoji. And shout out to the team. First year we did this show, we go run it back next year. Casey, as long as you invite me back.
Oh my gosh, of course, Coach. You have given us so much knowledge, expertise, and just fun here on WNBA today. Make sure you're following Coach because NBA season just got started this week as well, so the expertise and the fun continues on Sports Grid TV. Coach, as always, it's a pleasure to chat with you on a Friday. Audience, as always, it's a pleasure to chat with you on a Friday. Starting next week, though, WNBA turns to hockey, and you guys know we're going to continue to dial things up.
Look, Aaron Rodgers, it does seem like he really enjoys, people like us, Vinny, talking about him.
I don't know what's going on here with Aaron Rodgers. I think there's some frustration settling in, and the Jets were not supposed to be this bad of a defense, right? They've had a lot of injuries. Maybe that's the thing here. Robert Saleh's influence is there. I know they have their defensive coordinator running things, but now he's distracted.
Newswire, only on Sports Grid.
When you talk about how these series came to a head and what has been happening in this postseason for the Yanks, offensively, it hasn't been Aaron Judge.
Baseball is such a big win here. All you ask for, East Coast Monster City, West Coast Monster City, the biggest of biggest Titan superstars on both sides here, 2 mammoth fan bases. The entire country can buy into this one.
The Early Line, only on Sports Grid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions.